through these changes where I think he embraced his own mortality. You know, he knew that the end was near for whatever reason, and he would start bringing these ideas about how we want to live our life. You know, how if you could walk away from this, what would be the you know, what would be the foundation that you will hold on to keep it right, to keep progressing, you know. And, you know, the dope game is like we're in the business of taking life. He said we got to be in the business of saving life. And he talked about saving life almost in the way W.D. Muhammad talked about it. Saving life is partially being able to identify strategies and ideas that allow you to improve your situation. And if you have a great situation, saving life is being able to share that information with other people who don't have such an optimal situation, you know. So right around that time, I was studying a little bit of the nation stuff, and my thing is, you know, I have this deep-rooted things like, look, if a man made it, it ain't gonna last. Whether it's a building, it's a car, you know. And I was like, listen, man, God had to have a certain status, and you know, that's when I started studying. I realized, you know, this whole thing of, you know, Allah is the creator, and then there are the things that are created, and I really identify with that statement greatly, because I realize that while it's a conventional idea, the reaction to it for so long has been unconventional, and in some regards unhealthy.
Right.
And it's like, well, because I mean, I've floated around the Muslim community for years. Because I was like, man, I don't even want any of those problems. I was an Islamic nomad. You ask me my name, I might tell you Shamsuddin, because if I say Preacher Mars, that might spark a conversation. You know, how did you know, no, I don't even want to get into that. And
so what you're saying, you think your name was Shamsuddin before you became Muslim?
No.
Okay.
It was after I became Muslim. But
okay.
It's through that, as we were saying earlier, is that the emerging Muslim stage that I identified with, that 3-4 years after you take your Shahada. You know, where your beard grows. You wake up one day and you go, man, who's this cat in the mirror? What happened to your stash, man? What happened to this and that and that and that? And it slowly emerges. You know, you just happen to catch it one day. So it was during that period I was like, okay, cool. And that was the foundational period of how I wanted to live my life for the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years, or how that you want that to be a guide to your family or your community. And then came All That Made Me Funny.
Right.
You know, All That Made Me Funny was weird.
Right. But let's come back to that one.
Yes.
Well, you're a comedian. I mean, when did you realize you had a talent for comedy?
Man, I've been funny all my life. You know, but it's weird. Certain things I say on stage are not funny to me. I'm just sharing an idea. Now, people in the audience might be on the floor, dying. They're like, oh man, you know, you can see it in their eyes. They're cracking up. I just have thoughts on my mind. I'm just telling you what I think. Now, if they think it's funny, that's on them. I'm just giving information.
Right. So back in high school and junior high school, you were...
High school dream, but I grew up with a funny family, man. I had an aunt who was hilarious. Her name was Ruth Moss. And my aunt Ruth Moss was hysterical. She was like Pygmy Markham. She was like Mom's Mabley. She was like Richard Pryor. You know, and to see her interact with people from a young age, man, it was like cheating on a test, you know. You watched her be funny. I watched my father and my uncle, you know, walk up to the corner and hold court, you know. They just rapping and talking. All of a sudden, you see 15 guys on the corner just laughing, you know, talking about my Uncle Reggie. Oh, Reggie, you crazy, man, you know, but they come back for more, you know. There were times you just go sit there because you knew you were going to have a laugh some way or another, you know, and you would crack up. And so, in a way, I cheated because I watched them, and at a young age, you're like, I can do that. You know, the skills were...
Did you used to try it out on them, on your family? Were you able to make your family laugh?
No, I had to wait because the comedians in my family were my father and my aunt.
Right.
And once they got older, I mean, they didn't know I was doing comedy for probably about 2 years after the fact, after I started. Then they began hearing.
Right.
You know, in fact, my mother heard about it, and from someone up, my counselor, because I was in the clubs all the time, needed to be in class, and she took a plane up, and sure enough, there I was on stage, you know, telling jokes. They weren't halal at the time, but there's pre-Islam jokes. And yeah, you know, I thought my mom was gonna give me this long speech, and I did get a long speech. But at the end of it, she was like, "You're actually pretty good." There's some things I might not agree with. My mother's Christian, you know. There's some things that I might not agree with, the language sometimes. But she was like, "I really like what you're talking about." Because at 17 years old, I was a socially conscious comedian, which is that outgrowth I told you about. You know, from 12 to 17, you had all these issues. Not so much issues, but you had all these ideas that you wanted answers to. You're either going to find closure to them or clarity.
Right.
And once you have the clarity, a lot of times.
Like I get to hang out with different cultures doing this job, and I would like to vote for maybe a representative for Islam. Like I'd like to go with the Somalis for 2 months. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you why. I went to school with a Somali brother. His name was Mahad Adu. Now I love Mahad. Mahad was cool because even when you got him really upset, you know, he didn't jump on you. He just gave you that look like I could kill you, but I got things to do. Technically, it's what I call the Somali smile. You've seen it before. You say something real insulting, they don't get mad at you, they just give you that look. Hey, why don't you go back to Africa? See? And I realized something. I realized why my Somali brothers can't get jumped. Because they travel in packs of 1 to 300. Nothing's happening to them, Jack. You're a terrorist.
And prior to Allah Made Me Funny, what kind of work did you do in the comedic industry? And also, when you went to the university, I mean, what was your major? Did you have like other jobs before you did comedy full time?
Nothing out of the ordinary. You know, college first year, because I was too young to work in the clubs. So I would spend a lot of my time doing open mics. So I would be, you know, Wimpy Hunt's Club in Milwaukee, trying to lie about how old I was, you know, trying to look older, get into the clubs. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't let's say it wasn't a nurturing. It was a hard nurturing. You know, you basically stood on a table in front of a booth, you try to balance yourself and tell jokes. And some nights you were great, some nights you were horrible, you know, but it was the idea that there was a continuum to it. And I mean, jobs I had working hard labor, you know, manual labor jobs all over the place, even after college, you know.
But what was your degree in?
My degree was in broadcast journalism. I had a film minor, and broadcast journalism was very interesting because after my first year, I didn't like it, but it became a budget concern. My mother was like, listen, you got 4 years to get this done. You burn up 1 year. You know, we're not going to wait for you to start over again. So it was like, okay, you just got to finish this degree. But I think that degree now is very important in the development of myself as a comedian and a writer, and ultimately in development of Allah Made Me Funny.
And what kind of, I mean, what were your major jobs you had before Allah Made Me Funny in comedy?
In comedy, writing. I wrote for George Lopez. I wrote for Damon Wayans. Did some ghost writing for Nickelodeon. You know, everything down to writing the original pilot treatment for Lopez, which eventually they used for the George Lopez show. It was called Out at Home.
So you wrote that?
Yeah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. And you told me before you know Dave Chappelle?
Yeah.
And is he Muslim?
Yes.
Okay, and you gave him salams and he returned them to you?
He gave salams, he gave some wisdom and information.
Right.
You know. It shouldn't be, you know, if you really listen to Dave's sets, now you might have some wild out stuff. You know, you might have some wild out stuff, but I think people need to see him tour and maybe see him in a small club. And this guy is